Okay, so in today's late night stream, we're going to go over some Absolutist philosophy concepts. One thing I almost wanted to do was to react to some videos too, but my Bluetooth headphones I would need, because I don't want to play the audio like on stream or whatever, so I would need my Bluetooth headphones, but they're not charged, so that's fine. So yeah, let me go over a few basic concepts. So I have this expression that I would use sometimes in sort of tongue-in-cheek way. Oh, I think I forgot to change the art too. It's still my Hearthstone art to my objective podcasting, but whatever. So look, I have this expression that I say, qualify it first, right? Meaning, before you get into preserving the stimuli acme, or before you get into overcompensation and distraction and folly, favoritism, all these things, you can use these are the two things I can do, right? You can basically use an analogy, even though this isn't really what I was thinking of when I'm originally discussing these things, but I'll grant that you can use this somewhat. What you can do is you can look at like a Jungian archetype, and you can also look at the Freudian aspect. I'll sort of try to tie it in here, and that allows me to try to explain this. So a Jungian archetype would basically mean that everything you do reflects the nature of what I call like the nature of the process, or the the inherent reality. So you can I'm having trouble explaining this. Hang on, let me get on a clean stretch of road. This is too advanced for me to discuss so simply like that. Oh, this is a real nice stretch of road for where I'm going. All right, here we go. To get some nice late night driving ambiance, along with my gas tank is full. We're going a bit of a ways here, so here we go. Let's try to do it. Okay, so. There's a bit of this repression Jungian archetype idea, which again is not what it's based on, but I'm appealing to your preconceived notions because whatever, right? Like that's how people operate. Like something is more or less meaningful based on some association that you have to it. But whatever. The point is, the inherent reality is the same. So it's like you can act like, oh, your life is good and normal, and you're a good person and this and that, right? The problem is that everything you do is a recognition of the process. So for example, like, oh, you value your life, or you have like some basically that your life makes sense, or is a sound process, or has some value to it. Right, that's what you would say, or that's what you would cling to. The problem is that basically what you're doing is then it wouldn't be necessary to have all these other things like distractions. Your life is meaningful and valuable, and it's a sound process, which you have to dumb yourself down with alcohol, or you have to distract yourself with entertainment, escapism, right? So why would you need to do those things if it was a sound process? So it's what I call the imbalance overcompensation issue, is of, right, you create this extreme imbalance of posing a false absolute contrivance state, restricting your inherent potential ability, your ability to think is countered, you are reduced to a structure, you're indoctrinated to become a half-man to overcompensate. And the manner in which you do that is basically like, that's why you have to drink and smoke and dumb it is absolute, but it doesn't matter because right, they can't all be right. You'll say they're all wrong, but yours is right. Kind of like the fallacy with religion would say something similar, right? That the issue wouldn't be an atheist trying to disprove every religion in existence, right? The issue would be you making a case for yours and against every single other one, right? Because you have something to gain. The atheist wouldn't care. The atheist doesn't have anything to gain, right? The framing of that is always odd, like what the incentive could possibly be. At most, it could be this weird thing of like, oh, you're trying to justify certain actions, but those actions, like, or tendencies or whatever, that would be considered like sinful by God, etc. But those are things that you could do anyway, that human beings are capable of doing anyway. So, like, you don't need to justify it. It's like, even if you believed in God, okay, God created you with the ability to do that, so then what? But no, the whole thing about, like, repressed ideas, so you could pretend like, oh no, people aren't just horny, hedonistic animals, and, you know, their tendency isn't the same as animals reproducing in nature, and the pleasure is nature's way of inspiring reproduction, and, you know, all this. It's not that. It's the fact that, it's the fact that basically right, the framing is itself telling. What we would call negative is often the objective reality, and then we call it negative to discourage it, so that we create like an indoctrinated state in a different direction, right, to discourage that behavior, basically social engineering. And so now it's sort of impure framing, right? It's one thing on a functional level to say, okay, this is what we want to do, this is how we want to behave, right? That's one thing, but instead it's framed in a different way, like as an absolute and objective inherent thing, and also a situation where you're basically in a situation where, you know, the framing is already there, right? So it's already kind of biased and preconceived. So what you're saying is just what I call the inherent versus contrivance response effect. Basically, if you were to observe objective reality, it would be framed as negative. Oh, you're being negative, you're being a pessimist, you're being, you know, anti-human or whatever. Right, and so the problem with that is the fact that that's because contrivance and people are basically very pro-human. They're very egocentric, very, you know, we want to believe that the world revolves around us. So simply to observe objective reality and truth with no incentive, just that's the reality. Why should you have to hide from it? That would be framed as a negative. And then the artifice of contrivance and kind of pretending that everything revolves around us and the false absolutes therein, that would be framed as the default, kind of. So that's the issue, is basically, oh, it's supposedly absolute, but it requires all these prerequisites. We have to be indoctrinated in youth before we can think for ourselves. We have to bypass our critical thinking. We have to, you know, be constantly accountable and inhibited and all this kind of contrivance, and we have to, you know, just have all that happen, and then you have to distract yourself with entertainment and escapism. You have to dump yourself down with alcohol. All those things that you have to do as like prerequisites would indicate that it's not absolute, and by that logic it's arbitrary. Like, oh, you could do anything then and claim it to be absolute, as people have done throughout history, like the sigma effect that I talk about. Every society believes itself to be right, etc., etc. So anything can appear to be absolute with all those prerequisites, but there's a lot of framing or a lot of overcompensation and stuff that you have to do to get to that point. So right, so what that means is, again, it requires all those bullet points of like, and then even like if somebody doesn't go along with the contrivance state, oh, they're an outcast, we have to label them, we have to discredit them, they don't know any better, so it's supposedly an absolute that everybody, right, it's just the right way, the uniform way, but then there's deviation. Oh, some people don't do it, but it could be that they just simply choose something different or don't want it. It's actually the fact that, oh, they must just not know any better. They lack the ability to do it somehow, right? That's the emperor has no clothes, Bolshevik rhetoric, false duality fallacy of like the specific contrivance state of this era or your era that you live in, with all the social trappings and contrivances and the machination process and social norms and, you know, whatever it is that you are doing, right? That must be absolute, and anybody who doesn't do it lacks the ability to do it. So we got to label them, we got to undermine them, we got to dehumanize them, because, oh, nobody could possibly do anything different than our absolute contrivance state. Even them simply being neutral would be taken as a threat, because not only is your state of contrivance unnatural and imbalanced, but it requires constant reinforcement through externality, constant overcompensation. So it shows you you're not at peace with it, and it shows you the conflict of contrivance of pretending something is absolute that isn't. And so, again, with all that prerequisites, then it can appear to be absolute, but right, but that's like very preconceived framing. So that's how you can explain every society in human history. Is like, oh, that's all it takes, or that's all it would have taken to convince people. You have to appeal to the bread and circuses type mentality, and so again, that sort of shows you the problem with contrivance, is that it'll be self-fulfilling. Like, oh, it is absolute, but it requires all these prerequisites, all this cooperation, all this deference, and then also anybody who doesn't fit into it, nothing else could possibly exist. Nobody else could choose a different lifestyle or choices. Nobody else could do something different. Nobody else could be aware of the nature of the process. Nobody else could find fault in it. Right? It's this very self-serving, self-insistent kind of thing. And so that allows you to see what it's really about. And then the other part of it would be, okay, we can make an analogy to Sigmund Freud, even though, again, this wasn't really my inspiration for it, but the stimuli acme, where people are obsessed with hedonism and sex, and that's the highest form of value that they know. And so what that means is, obviously, some of the great proofs I gave are, like, again, profanity, Profanity would tell you that because, again, even when you're not thinking about something sexual, you still end up saying those terms, whether it be something positive or negative, right? You'll say a profane word, right, that relates to sex, even if that's not on your mind or that's not what you want. So, really, that's not really the topic of conversation, I mean. So, what else could we look at here? Is the fact that, again, you're kind of in a situation to be alone with a contrived state, so then you can think about it critically. That's why social contrivance just is incredible, and even in the areas that it is, or it appears to be, it's sort of redundant and self-serving. So, again, the point being that the inherent objective reality is the same, so it's like, oh, you can overcompensate for it, you can try to counteract it, right? But that doesn't change the nature. So now it's like, but people are more easily controlled when they believe that to be the case, like in a false absolute, so they don't have to think about it or question it, because otherwise, okay, you can question anything and everything endlessly forever, right, and never really reach a conclusion because you are so imaginative or inquisitive or whatever. What else can I discuss here? everything is the same process. So the way that society operates is it tries to do that. Like it'll try to pretend like something's an absolute and then it's not. So then you struggle with it. I could react to stuff in these. I could go over absolute philosophy concepts and stuff. You could just enjoy the drive even if I'm not talking some of the time, but basically you want to be in a position where you can objectively observe something. So that's why, going back to the beginning of what I was saying, I have the expression like qualify it first. What that means is regardless of money or functionalism or zero-sum things, hedonism and possessions and stuff, shouldn't you try to qualify objectively the specific state that you're in, the contrived state that you're in, and kind of choose it for yourself? But instead, you are kind of forced into it, and then you just kind of are more concerned with the initial basis of trying to do it for yourself. you have to realize is, again, qualify it first. So regardless of zero-sum functionalism, regardless of semi-acme, those things are sort of second. So yeah, the point with that was, again, qualify it first, be objective first, before you do anything else. I should end it because I'm kind of don't have the energy to do this and that at once, I guess.